Hello and welcome to episode 66 of Future Chat from Unwind Media. Every week on this show, we aim to discuss all of the week's most interesting science and tech news, and thank you for joining us. This episode is brought to you by Audible.com. To help out the show and get a free audiobook of your choice, as well as a free 30-day trial, please do visit audibletrial.com/unwind. They have more than 180,000 audiobooks and spoken word audio products, and you can get one free today. Again, that URL is audibletrial.com/unwind. All right, guys, we have entered, I guess, week two or three of the summer doldrums. But unlike last week, there are so many stories here. I don't even have to pretend there are a lot. There's just tons. Nick is back with us. Nick, how you doing?
I'm tired.
Yeah?
But you're here.
This weather is just. Ugh. It's gloomy outside, but it's also not 30 degrees, so we'll call it a wash.
Fair enough. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I finished my fence building project from this past week. That took way longer than I anticipated, but
Yeah, you meant for it to be one evening, is that right?
I meant for it to be half a day,
Okay.
and it took a half day plus 4 evenings plus another couple hours on Saturday. But I have a newfound respect for fence builders.
Okay.
At least
what was
ones
the
that
hardest
want to
part?
do it properly, because
Yeah.
I'm just way too picky about how things look. So that's why it took so long.
You wanted
I
everything
have-
to be lined up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have previously worked installing fences, and I can confirm.
Yeah.
This is a monstrous job.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But it's done now.
It's done. So
Nice.
on to the next DIY.
So guys, there's a couple things to follow up on from previous weeks. Specifically, the thing that everyone is talking about, but that there isn't yet a ton of huge news on, is Pluto. The New Horizons spacecraft continues to approach Pluto at a very rapid clip. It's supposed to be passing, at its closest pass is supposed to be on the 14th, I believe, the Tuesday. I'm not sure exactly the time, but basically what they're getting now is we're getting into this is the best view we're ever going to have of this planet for a long time sort of situation. And so one specific-
Non-planet, by the way.
It's a planet. It's the word planet is in the description we still use for it.
It's a dwarf. It's formerly known as a dwarf planet now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to call it a planet because that's way easier. I'm going to say, for the record, you can call Pluto whatever you want. I'm not going to judge, but a dwarf planet is still a planet. It's just smaller.
What does the International Astronomical Union know about anything, really?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, so this specific story I'm looking at, again, so NASA's putting up pictures as they get them of the best images they have of Pluto, and they're limited to only being able to send so much data back, and it takes something like 9 hours for the data to actually come back. But they've been looking as the spacecraft New Horizons approaches. We've been getting better and better looks at the so-called, I guess it's the backside of the moon is how they're referring to it, or the planet, because it's the one that we're not going to see in as much detail because it's going to be facing away from us as the spacecraft goes by. And so the latest image that they've sent back is of that back side, the side that we're not going to get in great detail. And so this is literally the photo we've just gotten is literally the best resolution image we're going to get for a couple decades until the next spacecraft or another spacecraft gets out there. And honestly, I was kind of disappointed in the image because it's pixely. It's still like 2 million miles away or something like that. And there's a lot of really interesting detail that you can kind of see, but it would be really interesting to see it in better detail. And we're only going to get to see the front side, the main side, in great detail, because I don't know if you guys have sort of pondered the math of the New Horizons spacecraft, but it took 9 years to get out there with several planetary redirects like gravity slingshots and very, very few sort of fueling direction changes. but they're getting within something. It's like a few thousand kilometers of this planet that's millions of kilometers away. I just think like I gotta give like a round of applause to the rocket scientists at NASA for being able to do that in such an awesome way to be able to get within a few thousand kilometers of something that far away.
So what I'm hearing is you wanna applaud them for getting that close, but you're still super disappointed in the resolution of that photograph.
Of the back, of the rear side, yes. So
Using 10-year-old technology.
right. So cameras are good no matter what. Like if 10-year-old camera, if you're talking about Pluto, it's gonna get detail. You can get a detailed image. But basically, what this made me realize, and I had never really thought about it in this way, we're basically firing a bullet into space and doing the best we can to make it go as fast as possible to get there really quickly. But then it's a bullet. It has no brakes. There's no reasonable way to slow down the spacecraft when it gets there. So it's just going to like zoom past at incredibly high speeds. And all we can do is basically aim our camera the best we can and take a couple pictures as we're going by. It just makes me realize how difficult space is for all those considerations. Like you can't just bring an unlimited amount of fuel to space because of the weight issue. And braking is even really hard, even if you had a lot of fuel, because it takes a bunch of time to build up that speed, and so it's going to take a bunch more time to slow the spacecraft back down if you actually wanted to orbit Pluto, for instance.
Yeah, so going back to your admiration point, I'd also like to add in that computer technology helps a lot with modeling and calculating. So they had quite a bit of help in determining the best trajectory and how much fuel they'd need and all that kind of stuff. Not to take away from their skill and expertise, but computers have come a long way, and the modeling that they do for space travel definitely helps out quite a bit.
True.
And also they are doing the corrections they need of their trajectory to stay on path.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're like one shot and it's like, well, that's it. Hopefully it hits it. Like you're still
they have limited opportunities to do that, but it's not.
But they still do it as needed.
So it's like it's less a cannon and more like what would you call it? Something on a trajectory that
Like a
can
rocket?
alter its path in live time. A rocket. It's more like a rocket. That's what it is.
I hope you're not trying to belittle the things that they have
No, I'm not. That's
accomplished.
why I said I'm not trying to take away from it.
No, I'm belittling Rob's nomenclature.
So it's my understanding actually that at NASA they have a specific teams of people when they launch rockets that actually do these calculations by hand. I'm sure there are computers that are involved, like check the math, for instance, but it's my understanding that they still do a lot of those calculations by hand to make sure that they're right.
Well, maybe by Excel spreadsheet. I don't know, by hand.
But I mean, manually.
That would just be the stupidest idea.
For which? To use Excel?
No, to do it all by hand.
That's how I'm almost certain that's how it's done.
It's also it's got to be heavily reliant upon computers though and modeling because that's a vastly underdetermined system.
Yeah.
So that's what I've heard. Again, they've probably modernized since the original rocket launches, but I know the Apollo missions were all calculated. The trajectories were calculated by hand.
And look where that got them, Rob.
And they got them to the moon.
Once in like 13 tries.
They went to the moon several times. It wasn't just once.
Details.
They also, I was reading on Reddit, I believe it was, that the first moon landing, they had like 25 seconds left of fuel when they touched down on the moon for the first time. Like that is crazy good planning, because you do want a little bit of extra, but I mean that's cutting it really close.
Yeah.
Oh.
Before we move on, I know we have other space stories, but talking about Pluto and how cool it is, the one thing that I almost want to say shocked was that Pluto wasn't blue. Like,
Okay.
it's brown, and you always think of it as like an icy planet, like blue. Like you always just Pluto's blue.
Do you?
Maybe that's just me, but I don't know about you guys. But when you see and it's like brown, it's like, oh, well, that's not exciting. Like, it's just
I don't
dirt.
know what I thought, but aren't a lot of the images like falsely colored?
No,
They're
no, they're based on actual colors. They're
Oh, okay.
enhanced, but
No.
Yeah, they colorize them based on a different. They have the camera that takes the images, and they have a camera that captures the colors, and then they map the color onto the image.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's like a dirty snowball, but with more rock than snow.
right. But I don't know. It kind of crushes that perception of what you'd think Pluto's supposed to be.
Right. That's interesting, though.
Yeah.
Hmm. So the next bit of follow up I have here specifically relates to, and Nick, you're not going to like this, our discussion about Slack from a few weeks ago. So someone put a story here, or someone blogged about a Douglas Adams reference from his book The Salmon of Doubt. Douglas Adams of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fame. He wrote a set of rules that describe reactions to technologies. And so the first rule is anything that's in the world when you're born is normal and ordinary and is just a natural part of the way the world works. Anything that's invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. And anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. And this has made me realize that Nick is now 36 years old. I don't know when that happened, but
Happy birthday, Nick.
Thanks, guys. I'm really happy about aging 10 years in like a couple weeks, but yeah.
But it strikes me as very true. But I really hope, like, I'm going to spend my life realizing that, like, acknowledging that, and trying to make sure that I stick with thinking that new technologies are quote new, exciting, and revolutionary. So I'm going to keep trying on Slack, which I really enjoy, and a lot of people in the tweets I read and the socials I network are really excited about, and hopefully that the next big thing that comes around when I reach a certain age will not befuddle me and make me think, what are the kids doing these days?
Have you guys ever considered what life after Google would be like?
Yes, terrifying, I think.
I think so too. I'm scared.
Do we still have a search engine? Like a good
I
one?
don't know.
We
I
just
don't
have
know.
DuckDuckGo.
Yeah. Maybe Alta Vista will come back.
It's funny because still, when you say DuckDuckGo, I don't think of the search engine. I just think of the board game with the ducks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fabulous game, by the way.
We're all so heavily invested in Google products that it's like, what am I going to do if it doesn't last?
Yeah, I agree.
It scares me.
Well, I don't know. This is also just a blogger who's decided his own order of things.
Well, no, it's Douglas Adams.
Still.
He's a pretty well-known writer of
Oh yes, I'm aware.
things that are like true and poignant, and I can certainly see where he's coming from in terms of people's reactions to technology in a general sense. Obviously, there are specific people who can buck that trend, but in general,
There's a lot of people that buck that trend.
Yeah.
Like older people that find helpful technologies. There are a lot of them who are very eager adopters.
Yeah,
it's true.
I think that same sentiment applies not just to technology, but just to social paradigm shifts that happen to like politically or ethically, like morally, any of that kind of stuff. Once you've reached a certain age, is kind of against your natural acceptance tendency, I think.
Yeah. I think so too. All right. So the next bit of follow-up I have here, I'm almost certain we talked about mosquitoes in a past episode. It might have been a couple months ago. We were talking about they were talking about injecting, or I guess inserting genes into mosquitoes that would cause them to die before they hit sexual maturity, but it would allow them to sort of grow up. and so they have now got a bit of information about the mosquitoes in question that have been put out in the world, and they've found that it gets rid of 9 out of 10 wild mosquitoes in colonies where they've put it out. I think it was there are specific species and colonies that they use these on, and so they've done trials in Panama, Brazil, Malaysia, and the Cayman Islands for dengue fever specifically. And so the 90% they call it population suppression rate is much better than the 30% that insecticides typically get. So I don't know that this is great, because it kind of seems like we're messing with nature, and there might be ramifications that we're not thinking about in terms of what could happen if mosquitoes are wiped out, or populations of mosquitoes in certain places are wiped out. But in terms of not spreading diseases like dengue fever, or another one they talk about is chikungunya virus. So I'm interested to see how this plays out.
On that note, I forget what I was listening to or reading or whatever it was, but a couple of weeks ago I read a story about eliminating mosquitoes and stuff like that, and they were discussing exactly that point. You know, what happens if we do just extinguish all these mosquitoes? Like, are there going to be unintended consequences? And whoever the scientist or the scholar on the topic was replied saying, you know, there are a lot of species that play a very integral part in the ecosystem, but mosquitoes aren't really one of them. Like, they aren't a very significant food source to a lot of animals that wouldn't have access to something else. And they're just really, really good at spreading disease, and that's about it. So we could probably, like, it would be disastrous for those diseases and the biodiversity of disease. But they were saying, you know, we could probably eliminate them without too many ill consequences.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like, no, they're just annoying. They're not good for anything. Just aggravating.
Saying like a place like Winnipeg that has way too many mosquitoes, like they're a pretty integral part of the food chain there, aren't they?
In that they eat people?
No, as in like birds and fish and other bugs eat them.
Yeah, but I mean, they're, well, maybe dragonflies, but I don't know.
Fairly large.
There are lots of insects that these species could rely on. I think is the point Nick was trying to make. Is that even if mosquitoes went away, there'd still be other bugs that they could eat. So it's not like it would devastate an ecosystem. It would just, they're doing more harm than they are good for other species.
Well, they're the bottom of a food chain. Like, they feed on us. But aside from that...
Well, us and large mammals.
Right, but you wouldn't have like an overpopulation of another type of bug if they went away. That's what I mean.
Right.
I don't think. Yeah.
I think it's fine that they go away. It'd be interesting to see the ramifications, but I don't think that it would be the worst thing in the world if there were just no more mosquitoes tomorrow.
So, also on this note, what do you get when you cross a mosquito and a mountain climber?
What?
Nothing. You can't cross a scalar and a vector.
All right.
Vector.
In biology, a mosquito is described as a disease vector because it carries disease.
Gotcha.
There you go.
Nice one, Nick.
Thanks. I like that one.
Nick, you have a piece of follow-up here on something called the Solar Impulse 2.
Are we not familiar?
I don't think so. The name doesn't sound familiar.
No, this is one of my my Kaya stories.
Okay.
It's the Solar Impulse. I think it's the first manned solar-powered air vehicle. Like it's already shattered records, and they were trying to get around the world.
Yeah.
Oh, this one. I had a story about this one, but I
Oh,
decided
do
not to
you?
talk about it. No, I didn't add it though. But
Okay.
this is one that recently landed in Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
Did it make it to Hawaii?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a record-breaking flight that it had just finished.
But it's not looking good for its entire journey because it had a very small window to cross the Atlantic in 2015,
Okay.
and it doesn't look like the weather will be favorable for it to make a transatlantic crossing later. Which it's funny because it's still on the western side of that continent, but they're like, yeah, probably can't do it.
This year, it can't do it.
Yeah, I guess.
What's your guys' feelings about these types of projects, either like solar vehicles that go on record-breaking journeys, or I guess in this case, solar airplanes? Like, in my eyes, it's not really a proof of concept of anything. It's just like, hey, we can do this. Let's
Isn't
do
that
it.
what a proof of concept is?
But a proof of concept is more like they're trying to prove something out to be a practical application for something else. You're never going to have single-manned airplanes purely solar powered as a primary means of transportation.
That would
What?
be awesome, though.
That would be awesome.
I think what they want to do is prove that you can sustainably fly an aircraft on solar power.
A one-man aircraft.
No, but it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be any men. Just an aircraft that can fly with solar power. Like indefinitely, that just doesn't have to come down.
For what purpose?
Transport, reconnaissance, any number of things.
Amazon deliveries.
Yeah.
That's
Mostly
what drones are,
Amazon.
guys. Drones are the future.
That was actually my thought process. I was like, how much farther could this thing go if you didn't cram a person in there?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's the longest solo flight in an unrefueled vehicle, which is kind of unfair because it's kind of always being fueled.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, jeez. Solar Impulse 2.
It just sounds like they're making it sound like it can break the law of conservation of energy, but that's really just not what's happening at all.
That's what they're saying, Rob?
It's very efficient. Well, they're saying it's unfueled.
No, unrefueled.
Yeah.
Right, but it's constantly being refueled. It's like saying... No, it's not like saying that. I guess it's kind of like saying... It's like saying you're flying another aircraft above the solar-powered aircraft that's like raining gasoline down onto it, and it's able to like absorb the gasoline and use it. We're not technically refueling it. It's just having gas.
I wasn't picturing that at all, Rob. I'm sorry.
Nor was I.
No, I had to kind of invent that scenario, but saying it's not refueled is kind of tenuous to me because it is being refueled. But maybe that's just me.
You know they actually do have mid-air refuelings.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. It
That's
doesn't
really
rain
cool.
down on the
It doesn't
airplane
rain down.
like osmosis.
But that would definitely be cheating if you had a cargo plane full of fuel that was just refueling it. That definitely counts as refueling. I was just trying to get around the technicality of it. Technically, it's not refueling because it's just raining down on it. Yeah. All right. That's enough with follow-up. Let's move to our main news stories for the week. And the biggest one, certainly the biggest one that I saw, is T-Mobile in the States, as part of their Un-carrier initiative, has made me want to switch to T-Mobile, basically. They are now offering a plan similar to Rogers' Roam Like Home plan, which basically you pay $5 or $15 extra a month, some nominal small fee per month, and you can use your data and your minutes and your texts anywhere in North America. Anywhere, I guess North America is Canada and the States in that case.
I think in any case, Rob.
No, because Mexico is part of North America, unless you
Central America.
Right, but is Central America a continent? Do we want to have that debate? I'm just going to stick with Canada and the U.S.
You know, the rich, primarily white North America.
The true North America, Rob.
Oh, no. We're getting racist up in this podcast. So
Viciously racist.
Yeah, so T-Mobile has a bunch of plans that will now have what they're calling free roaming, but it's basically just what cell phone service should be like, is that you pay your carrier for calling data and text, and you can use that anywhere you want. You don't have to pay. Like, if you don't have one of these kinds of plans that allows you to roam for a nominal fee, it's incredibly expensive to do anything with your phone unless you're in your home country. And so similarly to the way we've talked in the past about plans in Manitoba and Saskatchewan being way better than plans elsewhere in the country for Rogers, Telus, and Bell, that made me want to get a phone number for either Saskatchewan or Manitoba. This makes me just want to get like any kind of American phone number to get this plan, because it would ostensibly be cheaper than having Rogers in Canada if you were on T-Mobile roaming in Canada. It's cheaper. I'm sure there are conditions that would allow that not to work, but I look forward to the future where that's a thing.
Yeah. On that note, there are conditions, one of which is 50% of your time has to be in the States. So
every month?
Yeah, like on an ongoing. I think within each billing period, 50% of your usage has to be in the States.
What if it's
All right,
not?
Rob.
Like, what if?
Rob, just move to Brockville, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
It's right across the St. Lawrence from the States. Frequently, you have to roam there just because that's the only tower you can pick up.
Right.
Yeah, Windsor, Ontario is the same.
I don't care for either city very much, but you could do it, Rob. You could do it. I believe in you.
How does it work? Would you be charged more for roaming if you were gone? Like, if you went on a vacation to Canada for 3 weeks, what would happen?
Probably just wouldn't be eligible for the plan. Or wait.
Have you ever had plans to travel? You're not eligible for this plan?
Annually, maybe? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I haven't looked into it that much. I know they just talked about that in the article I read about it.
Right.
That because people would have that same idea.
6 months' time, there's a landmark Supreme Court case that allows Rob to get his T-Mobile phone.
I'm sure it would get to the Supreme Court.
I would love that.
In both countries, too. And only 6 months.
But yeah, no, I like the idea of this kind of plan. Like, we're even planning a trip out of country and looking to see what we're going to do, data-wise. Thankfully, where we're going to be is going to have Wi-Fi, like, all throughout, kind of easy access, so it's not going to be necessary to rely on our mobile data, but we're still going to use, like, our Fido dollars to get just the US travel package thing that they have.
Right.
Just kind of as a safety net, I guess. But yeah, there aren't a whole lot of options for traveling people out of their own kind of zone without having to pay roaming charges. Like, you can always go with the services that have like the pay-as-you-go, travel. They cater to people traveling kind of thing. But who wants to do that, right? Like, you'd rather just bring your phone and not have to worry about it. So hopefully this is a sign of the future. And one of the things that I found interesting was T-Mobile is still actually ending up paying roaming charges to the other carriers for their users roaming, but they're just not passing that charge on to the users. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like a value-added thing. Like, so they're not just getting rid of roaming; they're just eating the cost of paying those roaming charges to the other carriers.
That seems strange to me. I did not hear that detail, but that. It's great, but I don't see it as being financially feasible somehow.
Well, they're still having to charge. I think that they said $10 a month.
Yeah.
To, like you said, to people who aren't on the qualifying plans, so they're still making some of their money back, and the rest of the fee might be integrated, just taken out of their profit margin, I guess. But it's obviously they're hoping to gain enough new subscribers through this that it's going to make up for that.
Right.
Additional cost, I guess.
Yeah, my question would be, how much are you ever going to really roam ever?
Depends who you are. Yeah.
True.
I would take trips just because of that.
Rob just takes pictures of himself in Mexico. Look at me, I'm roaming for free. Woo!
I would do that.
I know.
So yeah, I'm excited to see what this means for the future, but for now, if you're in the States, T-Mobile has always been a pretty great option in terms of their CEO doing pretty crazy things like this for their customers.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to see
Or their
what
marketing
happens in the States.
department.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be
Now,
interesting to see
Rob,
what the competition comes up with.
Rob, do you know what I'm excited to see?
What's that?
I am excited to see a giant robot fight between the United States and Japan.
Speaking of our next story,
Yeah. You were like, yeah, top story this week, T-Mobile. I was like, nope. Good try, Rob, but that's not the biggest story this week.
What is the biggest story this week, Nick?
The U.S. has challenged Japan to a giant robot fight, and I believe Japan has accepted.
that is a great headline.
Do you remember MechWarrior?
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be like MechWarrior playing out live with probably a lot less shrapnel.
Less shrapnel.
Less shrapnel. I assume, because I assume there will be spectators, and shrapnel is not friendly to spectators.
Right.
We're just big bags of meat.
Now, are these robots? I'm watching the video now. Are these robots, or are
I
they
think-
manned? They look
Okay.
manned.
My first question is, doesn't matter, giant robots. I don't know. That's a
They
great
look
question.
manned. But it's also with paintballs? Is that... They're fighting with paintball guns? Like giant paintball guns?
I guess.
Huh.
Just look at the pictures of them.
I'm
I am
looking at the
so
pictures.
excited.
But it looks like Avatar or some other science fiction thing that I probably
They
didn't
look-
watch.
They look to be like at least 6 meters high.
Yeah.
Just, my goodness.
Have you guys ever watched Robot Wars?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like that on a grand scale.
Yeah. That was a pretty good show.
Like, you know in Futurama where they go to see the robot fights?
Yes.
If
it
that
like
is
that?
actually the future, I will be so happy.
I came up with the idea of robots versus wrestlers, and I got all excited, but and I realized that wasn't what this was.
You came up with the idea?
No, when you first said a robot fight, I was thinking robots versus wrestlers, but and I realized there are no wrestlers involved.
No.
I am intrigued by this.
Right?
Even though it's a year away.
I can't wait. Can we do like a live hangout when this happens?
Probably. I don't know if it'll be streamed or if it'll be...
YouTubed.
Yeah. The Japanese team is choosing the location. They'll probably pick Japan, I would assume. Because it seems like it's
likely.
really expensive to get your giant robot across the ocean.
They should do it in one of those like little Pacific islands.
Just
What,
just
Rob?
make it fully the plot of Pacific Rim.
Sorry?
The movie Pacific Rim, where they had giant robots,
sorry.
and then they'll awaken some type of alien sea monster, and then have to fight that out.
Well, wouldn't that be cliche?
I'm not sure it would. Like, it wouldn't be
For
cliche. 'cause
Japan,
it's
like
actually happening.
giant mechanical warriors and awakening giant sea monsters? Like, it seems pretty cliche.
Oh, reality, always following those story cliches.
Yeah.
But yes, we will continue to keep our eye on the giant robot fight as it develops. I'm not sure this news is bigger than the
I am
stuff.
100% certain that this is bigger news than T-Mobile.
Rob, I'm glad you brought that up because I was gonna say the same thing. Sorry, Nick.
No, just because it's a year away, I'm not saying it's not going to be cool. Yeah, in a year, it will be much more interesting.
I just think it's gonna be very anticlimactic with what's actually gonna happen. It sounds cool. We'll wait to see.
Yeah.
And
Every time I hear the words giant robot fight used together, I get this little childish grin on my face.
Yeah.
But I get that with free roaming in North America.
In the States.
and Mexico.
Yep. So it does look like it's going to be paintballs. If it was, like, if it was a non-spectator sport and that they had just video cameras filming it and everyone was miles away because they're using high explosives, that would get my excitement up to roaming levels. But
Yeah.
this sounds like it's fun and it's very interesting for the future of robotics, but it's not imminently more interesting.
Oh, I don't even think it has much to do with the future of robotics. Yeah, I could see like maybe robotic warfare-ish sort of stuff, like armored infantry.
Yeah.
But my prediction, my bold, possibly foolish prediction, is that this robot fight will happen before you get an equivalent plan in Canada.
I will guarantee that will happen.
Cool. Can someone
Even
mark
if
their
this
calendar?
gets delayed. All right. The next story I have here, since Mike, your stories are all considerably less important than the ones we have here for this week. The second story that I have is this is something that comes up a lot on this show and in science in general. The title of the article from Vox.com is called, or the title is "How to Avoid Getting Duped by Bad Research in 5 Case Studies." And this article basically talks about a guide that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, put out. And so listing 5 biases that come up a lot in research publications and ways to recognize those in sort of sensationalized science stories and how to avoid being fooled by them. Because there's something comes up a lot where one of us will post a link and we'll all go, wow, that sounds so cool, but then immediately go into skeptic mode and go, so that probably isn't exactly what we think it is. And I don't know that this is a real news story. This is just something that for this or this reason is bad. And I thought it would be fun to maybe use this in the future if we wanted to see if the news stories we were looking at or thought were interesting were actually interesting, and to just go through and see how many of the studies that come out fall victim to one or more of these biases. So, for example, the first one they talk about, and this is a pretty long guide, so I'll put a link to it, but the first one here, which I'll just talk about a little, it's called healthy user bias. So this is when you're comparing 2 groups, one group who is getting or who is not getting intervention, medical intervention, and one unhealthy group who is getting it. And so it's basically it's a type of selection bias that occurs when investigators fail to account for the fact that individuals who are more health conscious and actively seek treatment for health problems are generally destined to be healthier than those who do not. And so there are a lot of studies that will compare a group of healthy people with a group of unhealthy people and go, wow, the unhealthy people are unhealthy. And then use that to say, oh, well, that has something to do with the outcome of the study, when really that's what's going to happen if you formulate your study in that way. There are a bunch of others, or there are 4 others, I guess, but I would rather go through in detail. I just saw this today, so I'd rather go through in detail, and maybe if interesting things come up, maybe we can talk more about this in the future. But I think anything that especially scientists and medical researchers can do to limit the amount of studies that come out that are sensationalized or done with sort of not taking biases into account, if we can reduce that, it's going to be good overall for the scientific community in general and the population as a whole. Any thoughts to add?
The thing I don't like as much about trying to decide whether a scientific discovery is valid is the articles that are available, you generally don't get any insight into their methodology and their potential biases. And if you wanted to, you'd have to read the paper, which is behind a paywall.
Yeah.
So it's for people who even want to look into it deeper, you generally can't do it super easily, which is unfortunate. So you almost have to, all you have to rely on is either the articles that's reporting on it, which are generally useless, or the abstract that's free, which doesn't give any insight into it either, really.
Right.
I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could just go down like a train, a few stops, and hop off and go to a magical land of knowledge where they just let you get past those paywalls? It's
I
just,
don't
I
know.
love learning.
I don't know if you're sarcastically referring to a library, but
Or a school.
like some sort of place where they do a lot of learning, like a university.
if I could travel to every university that the research was done at that I want to, then
No, I mean
that'd be amazing.
Calgary. You could probably go to
Not
the
every
library.
study comes out of UCalgary, Nick.
No, but they have access to the
If
journal,
you're a
probably.
student member there,
Or an alumni.
no, alumni don't get paper access.
On
What?
campus?
No, you'd need like a student library card.
U of O always had a bank of computers that was just
Yeah.
open to the public for doing research on.
I don't think ours has that. I'll have to check again.
I would be very disappointed in Calgary if they didn't have that. Maybe
I
you
would
didn't
be
use it.
I would be extremely disappointed in Calgary if they don't have it. Mike, we're going to Calgary.
We
Sounds
at least
good.
need to find out for sure.
Get
Yeah.
your field
Can't
trip.
Just leave that.
We'll do like investigative journalism style, but we'll basically have to use a laptop and a mic. Just-
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm gonna read these case studies, but for the time being, go check out the guide if you find yourself reading a lot of medical studies and wondering whether they're real or not, which happens to me all the time. I read the headline and I'm like, wow, that seems so cool. I hope it is real and not made up in this or this way. Nick, you have a story here.
Oh man, I got a question for you.
What's
Did
that?
you just hear that belch?
I did not. I didn't
Okay.
hear it.
Interesting.
Did you hear
Alright.
it?
There's something up with my sound settings again.
I think I heard it. I just
Good.
didn't
Good.
say
Okay.
anything about it.
I muted my mic and everything. This is the worst. All right, onward.
Nick, you got a story here about the U.S. Army and solar cells?
Yeah, they have developed new solar cells that are 1,000 times thinner than current technology. And having read the article, that's basically it.
Okay. It is the
I mean,
military, so
They're that much more efficient, though, just in terms of material usage and things like that.
mhm.
But I don't know, I find it interesting that you have this organization that's just full of stereotypically very conservative thinking, but they're also some of the leaders in renewable energy because they want that energy security at their disposal.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Part of it too is that they're often in situations where there may not be fuel readily available.
Yeah.
So you'd want kind of a method of powering your stuff that doesn't rely on fuel.
I'm actually wondering, like, what if you could just power drones off of, like, just these super thin solar panels?
Yeah.
And they're only, like, these are significantly smaller than a piece of paper solar panels. Like, they're
Yeah.
less thick than a piece of paper.
When they say 1,000 times thinner, they mean 1,000 times thinner than a sheet of paper. That's the reference point they use in the story. That's crazy.
Yes.
A
Which
few
is
hundred
just-
nanometers across.
Yeah, it's like a few atoms deep or something like that.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
that's awesome.
But yeah, if you could, like, put that on the roof of a drone, how long could that go for? Probably very long, given solar impulse.
Yeah, yeah. Unless there's some shade, and then you'd need battery technology as well.
Well, apparently drones don't fly on cloudy days, but
Right.
neither here nor there.
It would suck to plan this, I guess, military operation, and then go, oh, it's cloudy. Sorry, we can't do it today. I hope they don't do anything.
Apparently that's what they do because the
Yeah,
drones fly very high and need to be able to see things on the ground to properly target stuff. So,
right. Because you wouldn't want them to be seen or be able to be easily shot down.
well, no, that would defeat the purpose.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to go high, and I guess that's not even so much the cloud cover preventing solar power. It's that you're above the clouds and you wouldn't be able to see through the clouds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
makes sense. All this stuff about solar research that we talk about on a weekly or monthly basis just really makes me excited for the next generation of solar stuff to come out. The fact that it's getting thinner, more efficient, a wider variety of materials, a wider variety of places where you can put those materials. Really looking forward to the solar future.
So to be clear, this isn't the panel is 1,000 times thinner. It's just the energy collecting part.
Right.
So you still need the other parts of the panel that may or may not be reduced in
Well, you may not
size.
want, you almost certainly wouldn't want a hundreds of nanometer across panel
Right.
because it would be very like great in 2 dimensions, but in that third dimension it would just be so breakable. You'd want to mount it on something more substantial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like every other week we're talking about a new breakthrough. Like I know we talked about oh, bye Nick. The the type of glass that scatters the light more,
Yep.
that increases absorption instead of getting reflected off. And that combined with the thinner cell, combined with not using silicon, to all this kind of stuff, it seems like if you combine all the improvements that we've had, you get a pretty kick-ass solar panel.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Next story here is to do with my favorite country, I think, right now, Sweden. I like
Right
all the
now.
Scandinavian countries. Their politics, their energy policies, pretty much everything. And I've been reading about these Nordic countries, specifically Sweden, and how they like to recycle basically everything. They have very little waste that makes it to landfills. And the story that I read here, uh, basically Sweden has more ability to process refuse for recycling and for just I think they also incinerate a bunch of it in order to generate energy. They've actually run out of waste. They've run out of garbage and have now begun importing refuse from Norway, from the neighboring countries, basically trucking in garbage, the opposite of the Springfield effect where they were just trying to stuff garbage everywhere. They are literally having to import garbage in order to be able to keep up their energy use from recycling and from waste. So I think that places in North America could do with taking this kind of stance when it comes to waste because we end up just throwing a lot of what we use, like packaging, just stuff that we have used. We just end up throwing it in landfills. And Sweden apparently only 4% of stuff that people throw away or get rid of in Sweden make it to landfills. The other 96% are either recycled or incinerated for electricity.
Rob, my question is, if you don't have landfills, where are you going to build your golf courses once the landfill's done?
On the land pre-landfill?
That so is burning the garbage, is that supposed to be better for the environment? Like technically it's still like producing carbon dioxide if you're combusting it.
Right, but you're combusting something.
Well,
Right.
also consider that, like, if you have a garbage incinerator that is a point emission source, it's much easier to scrub and make sure that it's, being handled properly than, like, a methane leak in a landfill.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, landfills are crazy for the amount of the amount of greenhouse gases they just sort of leach out over time as stuff decomposes and breaks down. What's this link you posted here, Nick, from NPR?
Um, that is a story on Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's actually the story I wanted,
Okay.
but well, it's Planet Money, so it's probably worth a listen.
Okay.
They did an episode not long ago where they were talking about garbage incinerators and how you'd think that'd be great in a place like New York City, but how it just all went spectacularly wrong.
Okay. What happened?
Um, there was a questionably timed garbage fire around the time that a bunch of financial backers or something like that were touring to see the garbage incineration facility.
Hmm.
And yeah, public sentiments were swayed, and it just didn't go well.
Huh.
Yeah, my feelings on garbage incineration are well documented as pro. But
Yeah, it's better than putting it in a landfill almost unequivocally.
also, like, you can generate power from it.
Yeah.
That's great. Keep recycling glass and metal, but just burn everything else.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Nick, you want to round out the main section of the show with something about moose collision. And honestly, reading the headline tells me almost nothing, but it does pique my interest.
So, I actually heard about this on just listening to the news one day. A strange story about a man who was driving and hit a moose.
Hmm.
And so I don't know if our listeners are familiar with the size of a moose. They're very large creatures.
They are.
And so he hit the moose in such a way that the top of his car was ripped off and his windshield was punched in. But the thing is, he kept driving.
Hmm.
Like, I guess another guy, because this is, like, I'm assuming rural Newfoundland, so very low population density. So he happened to pass another driver on the highway. This other driver, seeing, a moving wreck of a car with a guy bleeding profusely still piloting the vehicle, decided to call 911 and turn around and follow him. Eventually, I guess, got the guy to pull over and be like, "Hey, are you okay? Don't look like you're okay." And the guy's like, "Oh my God, I'm not okay. It's a good thing you stopped me."
Wow.
Yeah, like the guy has no recollection of the impact, which is apparently commonplace in car crashes. But he's also not sure why he was driving either.
Did you not wonder why his car wasn't recognizable anymore?
Well, this is why it's an interesting story, because it potentially sheds light on, how the human brain works.
Right. That's really weird.
Right?
Yeah.
Or the guy was just trying to dodge any sort of repercussion from hitting this moose and pretending that he didn't remember.
Mike, you're so skeptical about the weirdest things.
There is a subsection of this article that says moose tails met with incredulity. So I suppose we can just file Mike under there too.
I guess so. That's weird. Like,
weird that Mike doesn't buy a story, or
no, the whole story itself. Like, I'm not incredulous. I'm more just I don't even know what. Like, do they never, if nobody intervened, would they just carry on the rest of their life with this car that was effectively destroyed? Like, in the image on the link, which I'll include,
Like the car
They're
is in
not.
rough shape.
There's no windshield. They're looking through glass. Like, would they just continue on their daily life? Like, they would go home, go to sleep, wake up the next day, get back
I
in
th-
their car that's destroyed and drive. Like, when would you clue in yourself? Would it ever
if
happen?
if I recall correctly, he was a little confused why he felt breeze on his face, but it
Yeah.
didn't really
God.
like it didn't really phase him.
Huh.
I like the sub headline is Newfoundland driver's blackouts not surprising, scientist says. Not even like scientists say. It's like one scientist said that is not surprising.
Honestly, would you be surprised if someone sustained a massive head trauma and then, had a blackout?
I would actually.
Oh,
But that's what happened.
Right, but I'd be surprised that he didn't remember anything about it at all and just would have went on with his day.
people frequently don't remember accidents.
Yeah.
But like I guess the difference is
Right, but he'd stop
in
and
most
say, "Why is
accidents
my
you're
car destroyed? What happened?" Not just.
But if he
Oh, I'm
endured head
bleeding.
trauma like it says he did, like it looks like if you were sitting in the driver's seat of that car, you would have gotten hit in the head by part of a moose or part of your car.
or
Like, this
both.
isn't something where you'd sustain no damage. It is weird that he would just sort of like that your brain would go into autopilot. But like I know, for instance, if I'm walking home, or even if it's kind of terrifying that even if I'm biking home on a busy road, I will kind of zone out and just be on sort of autopilot, and then be almost home and be like, oh, where I don't remember the last 2 minutes of the road or something, and like my brain was just kind of making decisions for me, and I didn't have to think about it because everything was just sort of normal. If you were struck and had some sort of head injury and then suddenly just sort of snapped out of it and you're on the highway again, I can see how you would just sort of be like, whoa, that's weird. Something's different, but I can't quite place it. And then it would take somebody telling you, oh, this happened. You'd be like, oh, yeah, I guess that explains why my car is destroyed. But you'd never really clue into it until that point. It's one of those weird things about human memory that we don't fully understand. And that's, I think, what this article is trying to get at. I think.
I agree.
And Mike is incredulous.
Wait. Oh.
So
They're brooding.
I have a plan, Nick. We're gonna need a moose, and we're gonna need Mike's schedule for the next couple weeks.
Cool.
I want to hit his car with a moose and see how he reacts to this phenomenon. We might
The
need
way
a
you
couple-
phrase that, it's like we're going to blast a moose out of a cannon at the car.
That would do the job.
we
Sure
might need
would.
more than one moose. It's possible to repeat the experiment just to make sure we did it right.
Yeah, because reproducibility is important in all cases.
Yeah.
That the relevant XKCD, I think, of a scientist reacting to electric shock would
Yeah.
would be relevant here.
Yep.
All right. In that case, that does it for our main stories. We're gonna play our outro music and then come back with some of the other interesting stuff, smaller stuff we came up with this week. But for the time being, thanks for tuning into Future Chat. Again, I'd like to thank Audible.com for helping to support the show. You can help us out by visiting audibletrial.com/unwind right now to start a free 30-day trial and to get a free audiobook. We'll be back next week with more science and tech talk. Special programming note, next week will probably be the last show for a little while unless Mike and Nick want to take the reins on their own because I have a wedding and subsequent honeymoon. So I will likely be out of Future Chat commission until the end-ish of August. But at unwindmedia.com/futurechat, you'll be able to find past episodes of the show, this episode of the show, and plenty more. Again, that's unwindmedia.com/futurechat. See you next time.
Bye.
All right. I put that programming note in just as my own memory at the last minute, but I assume that you guys wouldn't take the reins of the show, but you could if you wanted to.
I
Do
don't
you
want
like
to
a-
edit anything.
You had like a 4-week honeymoon?
Well, I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't want to or be able to the day after the wedding. The week after that, it's the August long weekend, and we're gone to a cottage. the week after that would be in Hawaii. The week after that will be in Hawaii, and then it's the 22nd, I think. 22nd or 23rd is a Sunday. So last weekish.
Does
of
Hawaii
August.
not have internet access? That's kind of weird.
So I don't want to do that. If I lived in Hawaii, that would be another thing, but I don't want to do that from there. I would much rather. And Julia would also, I'm sure, be like, "What are you doing? Why are you packing your microphones to go
I was
down?"
going to say, I am fairly certain that I was going to say, I bet Rob does want to do it. It's just he's like, man, I'm going to get in so much trouble if I do future chat in Hawaii.
It's not that there wouldn't be time. It's just that
Do
I
future
also want to
chat.
relax.
Future chat, special Hawaiian edition.
I would go and visit the telescope and broadcast live from the
Oh, there you go.
protests.
That would be amazing.
That would be amazing. I don't even know if it's on the same island. I don't think it is.
It doesn't even matter. Just
Yeah,
Close enough, man. Just go.
that's true. I'm much closer than I otherwise would be. Okay. That being said, Mike will finally get to your story from last week about, I guess several countries have new climate goals to deal with climate change. What are those?
Well, the U.S. and Brazil have updated their commitments or come up with new ones, I guess, to, I believe, have 20% of their energy use on renewable non-hydroelectric sources.
Wow.
And I guess the key non-hydroelectric part is because of I guess there's been controversy over how hydroelectric kind of changes the environment quite a bit, that it kind of takes away from the renewable aspect as far as just disrupting ecosystems, that kind of thing, like setting up dams and that and such.
Right.
So it's kind of like hydroelectric's better than hydrocarbons, but it's not ideal, I guess. And then China, what was that?
Sorry, I was just going to jump in there. The problem is that whenever you do anything, there's an environmental impact.
Right.
Like, yeah, I don't know.
But setting up like a wind turbine isn't the same as building a dam. It's
Yeah, but
a
you're
wind
gonna
turbine's
kill birds
relatively non-disruptive.
You're going to start killing birds if you set up wind turbines. You're going to disrupt the wind patterns.
You're gonna give people headaches, Nick.
Yeah, you're going to have all this stress and stuff. But wind turbine sickness aside, like it's just, I don't know. I look at all the relevant numbers and stuff like that, and then people are like, actually, hydroelectric is terrible. We should do less of it. And it's like, what do you people want? Do you want the lights to come on? Do you?
Maybe just sending good thoughts out will give us enough energy for
We'll just put
replacing.
up big parallel rods that can resonate with the good vibrations people are sending and generate power that way.
There you go.
Jeez.
So that's U.S. and Brazil, and China also committed or has a goal, I guess, to get 20% from non-fossil fuels. So they're not going as far as saying non-hydroelectric, but they're saying just non-fossil fuels.
China is currently in the process of building a lot of dams
Yeah. So,
because cheap power. How about that?
Yeah.
but China's been kind of labeled as this horrible carbon dioxide producing country, but they're kind of given a pass because they're still trying to get out of poverty in a lot of places.
Right. Like
India being a similar case where
yeah.
they're kind of often given a free pass and say, okay, well, you guys can burn fossil fuels a little bit longer.
The argument is that, we went through a period of industrialization where we as industrialized nations went through a period of just burning the absolute bejesus out of some coal to get us some nice cheap power.
Yeah.
And so it's hypocritical to look at a nation that hasn't gotten that opportunity and saying, oh, yeah, well, you can't now. You're going to be poor forever. Sucks to be you. Please make us some nice cheap t-shirts.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's these countries have kind of come up with new targets, but this anytime I see this kind of thing, it reminds me of the Kyoto Accord and how once we completely missed the targets of that, it's like, oh well, we missed it, and that was kind of it. And it's there's not really any accountability when it comes to making these targets. Like it's nice to hear it being done, but it's not like, oh, if we don't make it, then there's going to be, X, Y, and Z consequences, or it's there's no putting your money where your mouth is in these cases. It's like, this is what we want to do, which is great, but how are you going to do it? And how are you going to ensure that, you make that promise right now? What are you going to do in, 10 or 20 years time once, new presidents are in power and that kind of thing, to make sure that those targets are still being looked at?
Right.
So I guess I have a more cynical view on this. It's nice to hear, but it's like, okay, well, let's see if it actually happens.
Yeah, I think the Kyoto Accord being sort of most people pledged to it and then did very little.
Yeah.
Makes me skeptical of any new sort of climate stuff, but if they can do it, that's great, and by all means keep trying, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I may have to hold my breath at some point, but I'm not going to hold my breath yet that this will change.
We'll have gas masks. You don't have to hold your breath.
Great.
Maybe with these new super thin solar cells, we can just cover everything in the solar cells and hope that keeps up with demand.
According to various maps I've seen, you only have to cover a small part of Africa to power the entire world. So we should just do that.
You say that like it's sarcasm, but that actually is mathematically real.
It's great because
Rob, how are you
transmission
going to
costs
distribute
aren't
that
a
energy,
thing.
Rob? How are you going to
Wires?
distribute that energy? Cars?
Wires.
You just run wires across oceans?
Yep.
Cars would be great though if you could just get a Tesla to charge its battery and then drive down to a different.
Wait, Mike just said, "What are you gonna do? String wires across oceans? That is a thing we do
Rob,
now."
Not to distribute power for communication.
Yeah,
and
it's the same idea.
It's really not, but
kind of.
It's not.
It's not.
It's not the same, but kind of.
No.
You wouldn't want to have necessarily. I mean, it's not a good idea to have all your solar power in one spot. It's just saying that compared to the surface of the Earth, it's a very tiny amount that would be needed. You would want it distributed.
It's a pointless illustration to make. The hurdle is not places to put solar cells.
I know.
That's not the hurdle.
No, it's not.
No. Anyway.
Interesting to think about, though.
Yep.
The next story I have here is from IBM, who you do not think of as somebody who is still pushing huge innovations in the chip-making department, but they are working with a company that is not Intel, or I guess several companies, none of which are Intel, to make new, very, very tiny, very, very power-efficient CPUs for computers. Right now, they are making the latest generation of computer chips is using a 14 nanometer engraving process. So basically, every 14 nanometers, there's another transistor. In 2016, they're moving to 10 nanometers. But IBM is working with a number of chip companies to create 7 nanometer chips. And I read this immediately after getting off my bike on, I guess it was Tuesday morning. Probably not Tuesday, Wednesday morning. This seems crazy to me. A company like Intel has been making chips for a really, really long time. IBM has made chips in the past, but they've kind of gotten out of being the number one group to do this. But they are now firmly pushing boundaries and pushing back against Intel, who have been dominant in this stuff. And the coolest thing to me, the reason that I thought it was worth mentioning, they're working with groups like Samsung and an organization called the SUNY Polytechnic Institute. I guess it's probably a university or that type of idea. And they're not using pure silicon as the substrate, but a silicon germanium alloy.
Have they used pure silicon for since a long time ago?
As the substrate, though, they use other materials. It's not just pure silicon, but.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's been pure silicon for a while. I could be wrong. I might be thinking of something else.
maybe. I think they definitely use other materials in the transistors, but it's not what they're on. And they definitely, I don't think they've used germanium to much success so far. I'm interested, particularly germanium is not all that common an element. I don't know how well this would scale to hundreds of millions of devices like already exist in the world, but I guess I
Aren't
would have to
they
think it probably could.
aren't they used extensively in solar panels right now?
Germanium?
I might be thinking of something else.
It's possible. I haven't heard of
They're
germanium being
both
used.
they're both semiconductors, which is why I ask.
Oh,
I
yeah, yeah,
imagine the
they're
germanium is there for doping.
they're right above one above the other, I believe. Um, so they're now using they use lasers to etch these transistors onto whatever substrate you're using, and so they're now using, I guess this is probably just a buzzword, but extreme ultraviolet lithography. So they're going even further into the ultraviolet to
Ultraviolet.
exactly. Uh,
Hyperviolet.
the more ultraviolet you go, the more energy you're using, but the smaller the wavelength of light, and so you can get more and more precise. And so that's what they need if you're going to do 7 nanometer. Um, if you're going to make have a transistor every 7 nanometers, you're going to need really, 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 really precise lasers. And this actually beats some of the research they were doing back in 2012, where they made 9 nanometer transistors using nanotubes, carbon nanotubes. But this is actually even smaller than that, and carbon nanotubes were presented as sort of the future of computer electronics, and or at least one possible future of electronics in general. So it's incredibly incredibly innovative to be able to take this even beyond a company like Intel that is purely focused on doing this. And they're saying that the 7 nanometer process apparently has twice the energy or the power density of the 10 nanometer one. So I think that means it will be basically twice as energy efficient, because you can have, at the same power, you will have twice the number of chips.
I didn't realize that making them smaller was a thing they were striving for.
Really?
'Cause I know, making them faster and also more power efficient, because I guess more on the mobile technology side. The big thing is how power hungry these processors are.
Yeah.
And so the faster processor is going to drain your battery more, but making them smaller, I didn't think that was an issue. Like, especially when you're talking about cloud compute, like they mentioned cloud computing in there. So when you have giant servers where you're hosting these, cloud computing systems, I didn't think that space was. Though that being said, I guess you want your server rooms or your hosts to have, like, they have those racks where they're all kind of compacted together. So I guess every little bit helps.
What I think is really funny is one reason the mobile industry is so enthusiastic about making stuff smaller is so that you can then fit a bigger battery into the phone.
Yeah.
Or mobile device.
Well, the chip itself is tiny. Like, the goal is to have it be as small as possible, but you want to fit as many transistors as you can onto that small area.
Right.
And so the smaller they are, the better.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the company that they're working with for these 7 nanometer chips is called Global Foundries, and they're working with IBM exclusively to make these for the next 10 years. So I'm pretty excited to see what, like, competition's always good. So Intel has been missing their benchmarks for releasing new chips. They've been promising, giving dates, and then not making those dates, and in some cases being very delayed. One of the latest Apple laptops was pushed. The release date was pushed back because of chip delays from Intel, and in the end, they just actually left. They just left them behind and skipped a generation and said, okay, we're gonna update this computer, and it's not gonna get the new processor. So having competition and having another company sort of pushing back against Intel is going to be helpful, I think, to them. All right. Next story here, Mike. Why don't we talk about your beer story from last week that we didn't get to?
I want Nick to hear that one.
Why don't you introduce it to me, and then do you want to go to another one?
Let's talk about your Google Maps.
Okay, fine. Uh, I always like hearing about transportation stories, and so I really like hearing about this. I think we've even talked about this in a past episode briefly about how UPS designs their routes so that UPS trucks don't have to turn left. They will make 3 rights before they make a left because left turns in densely packed cities are so hard to make. You have to worry about advanced greens, turning lights, oncoming traffic.
Yeah.
It's just way faster. And so there's a story here on Mashable from yesterday about New York City formally making, I guess they wrote a letter to Google asking for an option to be able to reduce left turns in Google Maps when you're doing navigation, or to be able to at least work that into their algorithms for directions.
Right.
Apparently, there were 20 people, 17 pedestrians, and 3 cyclists that were killed in the last year in New York by vehicles specifically making left-hand turns. And
It sounds like a lot.
It does seem like a lot, and obviously that is if it's something so easy to reduce, because basically when you're sitting in the left-hand lane through several lights waiting for cars ahead of you to get through, you're going to be pretty impatient. You're going to try to make a tiny gap, and so you're going to be going too fast, and that's when these kinds of accidents happen. So knowing that, and when you get to your or when you're getting to your destination, if you know how much faster it is to make, to go past the destination 1 block, turn right, and then turn right again, and then go straight through the next intersection, that's incredibly helpful in terms of easing traffic congestion, one, in terms of obviously pedestrian and cyclist safety. Apparently, this is also from the article, NPR has said that 25% of all vehicle crashes involving pedestrians happened while the vehicles were turning left. Like 1/4 of pedestrian driver traffic accidents are from that. So obviously it's something that you would want to reduce.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this will actually make it into Google Maps, but I think that it's a good idea because everyone hates turning left. It's really, really annoying, and you try to avoid it in traffic as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it would even help just vehicle-on-vehicle collisions, just because people are stupid, and what I find happens a lot is if you have say 4 lanes, 2 lanes, 2 lanes, 2 lanes, 2 lanes, going opposite ways, you'll have the people in your lane or people on your side trying to turn left, and people on the other side trying to turn left. So then they block each other's field of view. So then you're you think there's a gap there, and then you start turning, and then someone comes from the other lane next to the other left-hand turning lane, and the other guy has to either slam on his brakes because that person tries to take the gap that's not there, or the person trying to turn left has to just kind of keep inching until there is a gap, and it's it's not an ideal situation at all to be trying to turn left. So I'm all in favor of avoiding turning left.
Yeah, for sure. Nick, did you have anything to say about turning left as a cyclist who has possibly been endangered by people frantically trying to turn left?
I usually have to make 2 left turns a day.
Okay.
Both of them stress me out.
Yeah.
I'm pretty lucky in that my commute, well, I guess mostly by design, includes 2 left turns. One of them is at a light that has literally no traffic coming the other direction. So basically the only thing is the wait at the light, because it's not very trafficked, so it takes a while for the light to change. But then there's only one more, and just because of the way the light timing system works out, and I go to work early enough, there's literally never any traffic on my side of the street, so I can basically just wait there. But yeah, if I was making left turns in any kind of traffic, I would just not do that. the on a bike, the way it works in downtown Ottawa, I'm not sure if it's the same in Calgary. With the one road, Laurier, where we have bike lanes, they actually have a little box on the right-hand side of the traffic where you can basically you drive straight through the intersection on your bike and then stop at the far side of the intersection, and you're basically in a box that has a little bike painted on it, and that is where you can stop to be basically you stop at the light. When the light changes, you turn your bike 90 degrees. You're pointing left of where you were, and then going when the light changes.
Yeah.
Basically reducing any sort of danger from a left turn for a bike.
Yeah.
I have used that system, and I like that system a lot.
Yeah.
Calgary does not have that on its segregated bike lanes in all locations anyway.
It would be possible to do. You would just have to know to do it, and it's not necessarily intuitive to do that.
From what I've seen, I think they just put advanced screens for any bikes that want to turn left.
I've seen bike signals as well. They have those in a couple places here.
Yeah. Yep. Most alterations I make to my route are to make my left turns more or less hazardous.
Yeah. Makes sense. All right, Nick, you got a story here, this is probably part of a larger story, but basically things that are in your smartphone now that are extremely useful that 10 years ago would have been extremely expensive, like prohibitively expensive to carry on you all the time.
Yeah. Now it's just a little spectrometer. Basically goes onto the phone's camera, as I understand it. And I mean, in this situation, they're saying, oh yeah, you can test for skin cancer with this thing, which is good. I'm not here to argue that that's not great, but I don't know. I thought this would be interesting because it's part of a larger movement where people are just, creating attachments for smartphones because there's so much computing power there and there's so much potential there.
Yeah.
Like NASA uses smartphones a lot now. Like these, you can basically have a scientific instrument that just attaches onto a smartphone.
Yeah.
And do like experiments and stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things I've seen around quite a bit is the FLIR infrared cameras, like the thermal cameras, that you can, I think it's just an attachment onto the lens of the phone and with an associated app, and then it can do like thermal scanning with your phone, which is pretty cool. I think
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, for people who would have a use for that, even if you're just looking for thermal inefficiencies in your own home or for like a surveillance type thing, and it's all powered by your smartphone. So yeah, I think having other types of attachments that you can put on can only do better. And I know we've talked about other medical type applications for with the health kit type stuff that would potentially come into use in a more rudimentary sense, not a hardcore medical sense, but at least kind of pre-screening or that kind of thing. Because I don't think I'd rely on anything like that for definitive.
I'm thinking doctors could take that out into the field kind of thing, and it could be really useful there.
And it could flag for follow-up, medical examination kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of applications that have come out in the last couple of years as our phones get more and more advanced and also faster that are going to make them critical tools for medical, not necessarily diagnosis, but at least medical tracking.
Yeah.
And so yeah, if you had a spectrometer on your phone that would send the results to your doctor, if you did like say a weekly scan or something, if you were at risk of some sort of affliction, there's so many good reasons to use that all the time, and obviously doctors would be on board with having, because like doctors basically their job gets so much easier if their patient is collecting data on a regular basis instead of just sort of anecdotally saying, oh yeah, I think a couple weeks ago something. It's much better if you actually have sort of empirical data about your health
Yeah.
than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even, like heart rate monitors or, just skin temperature or moisture, that kind of stuff. Just any sort of data collection could help for a doctor to try to diagnose and track how you're doing, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's exciting stuff, and obviously eventually this will come to the kind of thing where you can get it for $100 at some probably supply store. I think it might take a little longer for it to get into built into a phone proper, but I think there will get to a certain point where it will be the normal thing to have one of these, if not in your camera, at least in your home, sort of like an ear or not ear thermometer, but like an under the tongue thermometer. It's just the kind of thing you have in your home to diagnose yourself with a fever, for instance, but that uses your phone and can communicate. You can communicate the results directly to your doctor, and it'll be more than just temperature.
I think our future will be everyone wearing little fanny packs with little attachments into it that you just put into your phone every time you need it.
Yeah.
Fanny packs. Oh God. Say it isn't so.
It'll be cool looking. Don't worry.
I imagine Project Ara would be. You just have your smartphone,
exactly.
and then you have a bunch of little modules for different things in your fanny pack.
Maybe not a fanny pack, but you'll have clothing that has little compartments you can at least store things in.
Yeah,
so
that seems more reasonable.
Yeah.
We're not bringing fanny packs back. So next to last story here. This piqued my interest so much because I love hearing about the work humans are doing into genetics. What we've been able to do, what biologists and geneticists have been able to do, is basically create new nucleotides for DNA, and they're variations on the current ones, the guanosine, adenine, thymine, and cytosine. So those are the four well-known nucleotide bases for DNA. G, A, C, and T.
Guanine is.
What do you mean?
I think you mispronounced guanine, or I did.
Okay, that's fair. That was the one, because there's 3 or 4 names that sound very similar. But so what they've started to do in the lab is tweak DNA to see if we can make DNA that has more than 4 letters is basically the goal. And in that way to give DNA new powers, either to just encode more information, to use DNA as information storage even more than we've done that a little bit, but to basically extend that alphabet. But so what they've been able to do is they've synthetically made 2 new nucleotides that are initialed P and Z. I will try to figure out what those actually stand for. Oh, they're probably extremely long names. So Z is 6-amino 5-nitro 2,1H pyridone, and P is 2-amino imidazo 1,2A 1,3,5 triazine 4,8H1. Yeah. So
do you have a link for those?
Sorry?
Do you have a link for those names?
I do have a link for those names. It's in the story, but so I'll put a link. It's on. It's in Jack's. You will be able to find a link in the notes if you're listening. But they basically work with regular DNA, so that if you incorporate those bases into DNA, the helix structure isn't affected, and everything basically works. Obviously, there's no life with this yet because it's completely brand new, and there's no enzymes or anything in the human body or in any living thing that can generate these, but it fits in the geometry properly. And the way we've been going with genetic research, the goal of this is basically if you have multiple base pairs, the base pairs and different combinations of them are what code for different amino acids in genetic instructions. And so if you have extra bases, you can generate way more, like orders of magnitude more amino acids using those instructions. So I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on this or any possible, I guess, things you could do with it, uses?
Um, well, one, I found a picture of what they look like,
Okay,
and
yeah.
it's neat.
See it.
I don't know if you're familiar with the structure of DNA or the DNA-based pairs,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's neat. Um, there has been work to try and back up data in bacteria, kind of sort of thing,
Okay.
just using base pairs, so that could lead to interesting work that way, where like you have some goo that is your backup and is alive somehow.
Right.
If Jurassic World taught me anything, it's that you can create militarized dinosaurs out of DNA modification. So I'm pretty excited for that.
I
But
gotta
this is
see
more
that.
than that.
Hmm?
This is more than just genetic modification. This is adding new, like this is expanding DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get too far, I'm going to point out for the live viewers, there's an app in Hangouts called Showcase. If you're watching this on Google Plus, you can go and see the link that shows the pictures of the DNA in case you're interested. I don't know. I haven't used Showcase that much, but it seems like it would be useful if people actually find it useful. Let me know. But yeah, you can make new dinosaurs without these new letters. These new letters are like infinitely more useful. You could make brand new, much more complicated life. Like we think of life as very complicated, and in a lot of ways it is complicated, but this would make things orders of magnitude more complicated. Once we get to computing systems that can keep up with, or that can sort of do as much computationally as the human brain can, if they had this to work with, they could make things that, or conceive of things at least, that were much more complicated and potentially useful, or potentially destructive to humans than we could ever dream of.
My understanding of genetic modification is that they'll take parts of DNA from existing species or known properties and apply that to other things in hopes that it'll get the same characteristics as the original thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you're coming up with new parts of DNA, you don't know what those parts do yet.
Yeah.
Right? So what would be
I'm
the
not even. Sorry.
what would be the process if you're just coming up with new stuff and saying, "Oh, let's see what this does," and like, how would you know where to put it in the DNA sequence? And
Well, you
I'm
wouldn't
wondering,
know.
like,
could
how do
test.
they even know that it works? Like, can
that's what I
something be
mean.
alive with those base pairs?
Well, they don't know that yet, but they're basically just scratching the surface. They found these two letters, or these two bases, Z and P, do form a helix. They were experimenting with a bunch of others that kind of or almost did, but they weren't quite helixes. But these ones actually do. And so it's the kind of thing where you build these, and we've been building custom DNA. I'll call it custom DNA for lack of a better term, for a few years now. But what they could try to do is basically build this DNA with custom things, and then sort of run it through existing enzymes and existing processes in living cells to see what kind of amino acids it would generate. And then from there, you'd be able to go and see if those amino acids have any use in the body, see if they bind to create different proteins,
Right.
and just it makes experimenting a lot more varied if you have extra bases to work with. Like it completely opens up the possibilities for more biology than we can even conceive of.
Man, that's true. I had just completely forgotten that part. It's like, what amino acid would that even code for? Jeez.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like a throw everything at the wall and see what sticks process first,
Right.
as far as if it forms anything useful. And I think computer simulations would play a pretty big part in that
Oh yeah,
too.
for sure. Those are getting better and better, watching how proteins fold with different amino acids. So if you discovered that some new combination of DNA generated some amino acid, and then that amino acid folded into a protein and left some new thing, and then there's a lot of experimentation that would need to be done, but modeling would certainly help narrow down possibilities of things to try.
Yeah.
Very cool. Because right now right now creating proteins manually by adding amino acids one at a time to a protein chain is extremely like not computationally expensive, but extremely lab expensive.
Yeah.
And so if you had a way to make that a lot more efficient using DNA to encode those instructions, it would be potentially very useful to geneticists. All right, Mike, you wanted Nick to be here. Nick is now here.
I'm here.
What's your story about beer?
My story about beer this week is making beer as easy as pushing a button on your coffee maker to brew a cup of coffee. But now you can brew a keg of beer just as easily. And Nick is our resident home brewer.
Brewmaster.
So brewmaster Nick. So I'm sure he'll have something to say on this, but the concept of it is they're saying beer is, the second or third or fourth most drunk beverage in the world, but it's only made in it's insignificantly small percentage of homes by people, whereas coffee is arguably equally or more popular than beer, but is made in 50 to 60% of homes. So why can't you make beer the same way you make coffee, as on demand and customized as we know to make coffee? So the idea behind this Pico Brew machine is that you add the ingredients for your wort, is what is called. Nick can be the authority on this.
Yep, that's a word.
Yeah, and so you make the wort, and then from my understanding, you have to add it to the brewing process after the wort's made. So it's almost a two-step process. It seems like. Nick, maybe you could confirm.
I'm just trying to look at the article.
Oh, okay. So anyway, this machine, it takes out the complication of making the wort. So it makes the wort and then transfers it over to the container to actually brew the beer all on its own. So they're marketing it as a set it and forget it process. So you add in your ingredients for the wort based on however you want to make your beer, and then it transfers it over and brews your beer for you. And so once it's ready, it's ready, and you just chill it and drink it, I guess. And apparently the guy who reviewed this unit said it was good beer. So I thought it was interesting, just the idea of being able to customize your beer and make it as accessible as coffee, possibly. Obviously a longer process, but
Yeah.
it seems to be the kind of thing where anyone can kind of pick one up and make their own beer, versus the effort that it takes to brew your own beer, as Nick can attest to. But some might say that takes away from the art and the process of making beer. So I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts, and specifically Nick's on this type of development.
In terms of it takes away from the art and the process, it's basically something people say anytime a machine takes over something that's imprecise. That's not at all my concern. Sure, if you get Pico Brewing and you find that you would like it just slightly different, then by all means do it differently. But I mean, I guess the big difference between beer and coffee is that coffee takes, a few minutes to make, and beer takes a few weeks to make.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it's not the same time scale.
Right.
Yeah, no, they're. Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably the.
Well, home wine kits are fairly straightforward, aren't they? It's the kind of set and forget it thing. You just let it sit as long as you need to. I don't know if you've ever made your own wine, but
I know I'm familiar-ish with it. It's similar. I think one of the biggest differences is you don't have to worry about carbonation.
Yeah.
Or you let it sit for way longer, something.
Nick,
would you guys get something like this, or at least use it?
If the price came way down, then maybe.
So Nick, the price here, it says $2,000, which I'm assuming is American, so it'd probably be a little bit more in Canada. Um, What compare that to the cost of having this kind of thing at home? Like it was $100 or $200 something, right? Quite a
Uh,
bit cheaper.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like a tenth as expensive or less, depending on what
Yeah.
you're going for. Because you can buy kits that come with the wort, like the already
Mm-hmm.
brewed wort. So all you need to do is put it in a sterile bucket, pitch the yeast, and seal it up.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Then, granted, bottling is a separate step, but
Yeah.
You'd still have to bottle with this system too, though, I think.
Yeah.
yeah, probably.
So, that's interesting. So it's not really taking out a step if kits come with wort already.
True.
Well, and it depends on what you want. Like those worts that you can buy are not tailored to your own personal tastes.
That's true.
Hmm. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that about wraps it up for this week. Any
Neat.
last words? As usual, crickets. Um, I'd like to give a huge shout out to our current 2 viewers who have been with us
Oh,
through pretty much the entire episode.
nice.
Uh, Thanks for the support, guys. I would encourage you, even if you have already tried Audible or have no interest in reading or listening to audiobooks, to go to audibletrial.com/unwind and at least click on it to let us know that you enjoyed the episode. And feel free to recommend it to people if you enjoyed it, which it seems like you did, or else you might be asleep. That's obviously a possibility. But yeah, thanks for tuning in this week, and we'll talk to you guys next week for the last time in a little while next Sunday.
Sounds good.
Cool.
All right, see you guys.
See ya.
Bye.